Okay. Do you think you can explain to me how you got interested in becoming an environmental lawyer?
Sure. So I worked between college and law school as a field biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and it was a wonderful time. I was working with tagging elephant seals and banding birds, and it was wonderful. And I had been admitted to law school because I wanted to do something that helped people. And so I went there, and after my first semester, I just felt I didn't feel connected, and so I decided that I wanted to have a career in the environmental field. So I did a joint degree between law and engineering. So when I graduated, I had an expertise in how the legal system works, but also a better sort of scientific understanding of how the natural world works. And that combination has been very helpful.
And then how did you become an environmental lawyer? You said you went to law school and everything, so I guess.
Yeah, I had a long-standing interest in the environment. I was a Boy Scout growing up.
Okay.
So we used to go camping a lot. I used to do a lot of stuff on the water. And so I wanted a field that sort of gave back.
That's interesting. And then have you ever always been involved in kind of like policies and everything, or did that kind of start after you went into environmental law?
Well, if you work as a lawyer, you're always somehow involved with environmental policy because laws basically are the ways that policies get implemented. So you might have a policy that says you want to clean up the coast. And that's fine as a general goal, as a general policy, but the question is, how are you going to make that happen? So you're going to have laws that fines people for littering, that sends people to jail for littering. What are the laws that are actually going to be passed that are going to implement the policy? And then lawyers get involved essentially in a lot of ways. One of them is prosecuting people who violate the laws. One of them is defending people who violate the laws. One of them is working with people and companies who say, I want to do this. Does this violate the law? How can I do this and stay in compliance?
And then what would your kind of day-to-day routine be if you were
Yes, there are many, many different types of lawyers. So let me just give you a few examples.
Okay.
So one example might be that you work for a law firm and your clients. So for example, let's say Patagonia, for example, they're based in Ventura. And they say they want to build a manufacturing plant in Ventura. And they say we have this waste that we produce from our manufacturing process for making the jackets and such. How can we dispose of the waste in compliance with the laws? And so I would, if I'm their lawyer, I would work with them and say, okay, if you produce, this kind of sludge, this is what you have to do. If you produce this, chemical dimethyl terrible, call it what you will, this is what you do. If you have air emissions, this is what you do. There are laws that cover all of those. So one kind of lawyer works with clients to say, this is what you have to do to to follow the law. Second type of lawyer would be working for the government. And let's say that Patagonia, again, just to take an example, let's say that they did not dispose of their waste properly. They just dumped it in the ocean, or they dumped it out their backyard. And the government comes in, the county or the state, and says, hey, you violated the law. They then have to go, if Patagonia doesn't agree, says no, they don't plead guilty. They say, no, we complied with the law, or we didn't do what you said we did. Then the government has to bring a case against them, and the government will have a lawyer, a prosecutor, sometimes a district attorney, sometimes a state's attorney, who will bring the case against them. That means there's a lawyer on the other side as well, who will be a defense attorney, usually from a private firm, and they will defend Patagonia, saying, again, either they didn't violate the law, or they didn't do what you said they did.
Interesting. And those are usually always environmental lawyers in terms of anything that comes down to the environment. Those are the specialty environmental lawyers.
I mean, you can other lawyers do that, but generally it's environmental lawyers. Then there's a fourth category, which is more sort of pure policy, which is when agencies, environmental agencies, try to take a broad policy and to pass laws or regulations to implement it, someone has to write those, and that's almost always lawyers.
Okay.
And so lawyers get very involved with policy as well. Okay. And then the final category is, let's say you want to work for an environmental group, like Friends of the Bay, or Save the Seal, and you're unhappy with a proposed project that's going to affect the seal rookery, and you want to challenge that project, make sure it's not built. you as a lawyer are going to bring lawsuits or negotiate with them to try to change what they're doing. And that's what lawyers do also.
And then could you explain to me your favorite thing about your career?
Well, my career is as much a teacher as an environmental lawyer. So as a teacher of environmental law, I love seeing students who are excited about the environment and sort of teach them how to work in the field, but also challenge some of their assumptions, right? So a lot of people working in the environmental field assume government is always good and private companies are always bad, and that's not true, right? There are a lot of private companies who are trying to do the right thing. There are sometimes government officials who are actually doing things that harm the environment. It's not a simple black and white situation. So that's as a teacher. As someone who works with governments a lot, helping them develop policies, I do a lot of work with drinking water, for example. And so, I work with EPA to help them develop rules to try to improve the quality of drinking water around the country.
And then, do you think you could tell me the hardest part about being an environmental lawyer?
So there are two things that are hard. The first is being an environmental lawyer. You get into environmental law because you love the environment, but your work is done in an office and in a courtroom. And so even though I got into the field because I love the environment, I'm actually not working in the environment. I'm working to protect the environment, but I'm working in an office. So that's hard. The second thing is that you don't always win. Right? A lot of times development goes ahead, the environment is harmed, and you fight the good fight. But this is a field where oftentimes you lose. But some of the time you do win, and that basically has to be enough.
And then, how do you feel like you help the community as like an environmental lawyer?
So the main thing I do that helps the community is I serve on the board of an environmental group called the Environmental Defense Center. That's based in Santa Barbara, and it's the main environmental group for the Central Coast of California. And so we're very involved in opposing offshore oil drilling, onshore oil drilling, and promoting creek restoration. And so I'm quite active on that board. And so the way I help in the community is basically to help with this environmental group.
Can you explain the process of education that one usually goes through to become an environmental lawyer?
Sure. So to become any kind of lawyer, not just environmental lawyer, you need to graduate from college, and then you apply to law school. And law school is a 3-year graduate school, and there are great law schools in every state, all over the country. And once you're in law school, everyone takes pretty much the same courses the first year, but after that you can specialize. And so if you want to do environmental law, you might take courses like international environmental law, or natural resources law, or wildlife law. And then oftentimes in the summers between your years, you'll work in the environmental field as well, either for the government or an environmental group or a private firm. I've always thought that it's helpful to have a scientific background working in the environmental field, because a lot of what you're dealing with is science, right? How do we know the environment is improving or being degraded? How do we know a particular action is harming species or helping species? There's a lot of science involved with that. And it's good to have a background so you're comfortable talking with scientists.
So you would suggest majoring for your undergraduate in like a science field if you want to?
I don't think you have to major. I majored in history.
Okay.
But I took chemistry, physics, biology, math. So I think the major can be whatever excites you. But in addition to your major, make sure you get a solid grounding in the basic sciences.